Not all horror happens in dark forests or haunted houses. Sometimes it begins in the quiet spaces of ordinary lives, when you're alone, emotionally worn down, and no one's watching but you. Or so you think. These are 3 true stories of subtle invasions, where safety was an illusion and evil came knocking, without ever raising its voice. I was 36 and broken. It had been 6 months since she left, but my apartment still felt like she might walk back in at any moment. Her favorite mug sat untouched in the cupboard. Her book, half read, still rested on the nightstand like a paused conversation. I knew I should have packed it all away, boxed it up like everyone told me, but I didn't. I couldn't. Most days I moved like a ghost through my own life, quiet, mechanical, just enough to be functional. I went to work, I came home. I laid on the couch for hours with the TV playing things I never watched. Weekends were worse. Weekends were empty. That Saturday night was one of those nights. I remember lying on the couch in my bedroom. Yes, I had a couch in there. And the only reason I knew it was past 9 p.m. was because my mom had called again. 4th time that day. I let it ring. I didn't have the heart to pick up. I knew she meant well, but the last thing I wanted to hear was, "Have you eaten anything today?" Or maybe just go outside for a walk. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, then scrolled through streaming apps until I landed on some low-budget horror film with a grainy thumbnail and a title I'd forget within minutes. It was bad, truly bad. The audio was so poorly mixed that I had to turn the volume up every time someone spoke, and then instantly down again when a jump scare tried to blow out my speakers. But I kept watching. I wasn't watching it for the thrill. I was watching because it gave me something to react to. Even if it was just frustration or boredom, it was better than feeling nothing at all. It was spring. The windows were cracked open, letting in a soft breeze that reminded me the world was still turning. I couldn't hear the city through them, just faint creaks and the occasional chirp from whatever bird hadn't figured out it was nighttime. The movie droned on, and for once I started to nod off. But then, something strange. A sound. It didn't belong to the movie. Not really. I heard it again. Just a second or two of metallic impact. Clang, sharp, hollow, like a pipe striking concrete. At first I thought it was part of the movie, a background noise. Maybe I'd missed a scene change or some character moving through a basement. But as I turned back toward the screen, I saw it was still paused. I'd forgotten I'd even paused it. The room was completely still. No sound, no motion, and yet, I had just heard it, clear as day. I sat there, eyes locked on the screen, the remote still resting lightly in my hand. My heart didn't race, not yet. It just waited, like my body was asking my brain for instructions it didn't have. Was it in the house? I muted the TV, sat very still, waited. 40 seconds passed, maybe more. Then, clang, again, identical. Same pitch, same sharpness, like it was replaying on a loop, but not from the speakers, from somewhere else. I stood up slowly, trying not to make a sound. My eyes scanned the room. Nothing was out of place. The couch, the desk, the shelf of unread books, my laptop asleep on the table. I wasn't afraid, not really, but something felt misaligned. Like the house was suddenly unfamiliar, rearranged just slightly in a way only I would notice. The logical part of my brain kicked in. A loose pipe, maybe something outside, and that's when I remembered. I had the windows open, just a crack, spring breeze and all that. I stepped toward the window by my desk, the one that overlooked the backyard. The curtain was thin, the kind that moves with the air. I pulled it aside just enough to see out. At first, I saw nothing. Just the usual. Porch lights from the neighbor's house, a few trees, the faint outline of my deck chairs. Wait, one chair was no longer where I left it. It was in the middle of the lawn, and next to it stood a kid, maybe 8, maybe 10 years old, standing completely still, holding something long and gray. A PVC pipe, I guessed. I couldn't see his face. He was turned slightly away, half lost in shadow. But his size, his posture, it was clear. A kid. He raised the pipe, clang, right against the metal of the chair. That was the sound. It had been him. I stepped back from the window instinctively, heart starting to pound now. Not because he was dangerous. He was just a kid, right? Lost, maybe, confused. But he'd been out there for a while, and he hadn't called out, hadn't moved. He just stood there, hitting the chair, over and over, like a signal, like a summon. I stood there for a long time, just staring at the edge of the curtain, as if the fabric could explain what I'd just seen. A kid, alone, in the dark, smack in a chair with a pipe, no coat, no flashlight, no sign of panic. It didn't make sense. Maybe he was lost. Maybe he was scared. Maybe he wasn't. My chest tightened. I tried to breathe slow, keep my pulse down. Don't overreact. That's what I told myself. Just go down, turn on the porch light, and talk to him. But when I reached the back door and touched the knob, I froze. Something didn't feel right. If that boy was really in trouble, wouldn't he have knocked, called out, tried to get my attention in a way that didn't involve acting like some possessed wind-up toy? I let go of the handle and moved quietly to the narrow window beside the door. It overlooked the steps and the far end of the backyard. I tilted the blind just enough to peek through without being seen. And what I saw made my stomach drop. There were 2 grown men crouching just below my back door, one to the left, one to the right. Dressed in black from head to toe, perfectly still, like predators holding their breath. I didn't know how long they'd been there, but I knew exactly why they were. That kid wasn't asking for help. He was the bait. I didn't think. I just moved. I dropped the blind, spun on my heel, and sprinted up the stairs. My phone was in my pocket. I was already dialing 911 with trembling fingers before I hit the top step. As it rang, I heard it. Bang! The back door shook. Another bang. They'd trying to break it in. I ducked into the upstairs bathroom, slammed the door, locked it, then backed into the tub, pressing myself against the cold tile. The dispatcher answered. I gave my address in a whisper, trying not to cry, trying not to breathe too loud. Then came the sound I feared most. Footsteps. Inside the house. They'd made it in. I heard the thud of boots on hardwood, the creak of the stairs. My heart beat so loudly it felt like it might give me away. I pressed the phone against my chest to muffle the sound. Then, outside the bathroom, silence. No footsteps, no voices, just the slow, unmistakable sound of the doorknob turning. I squeezed my eyes shut. Then, boom, a hard kick. The door shuddered. I bit my tongue to keep from screaming. "I've called the police!" I shouted. "They're on their way." And just like that, footsteps, running, down the stairs, a door slamming, then silence. It felt like a full minute before I let go of the breath I didn't know I was holding. The police arrived within 5 minutes. I ran downstairs barefoot, waving them in with a shaking hand. They searched the house. Of course, the men were gone. So was the kid. The house was quiet again. But it was the wrong kind of quiet. Too still, too clean. Like nothing had ever happened. Like it was all in my head. The officers were polite, professional. They moved room to room, asked me the expected questions. I told them everything I could. The banging pipe, the kid in the backyard, the two men at the door. One of them jotted notes while the other nodded in that calm, neutral way they probably teach you in training. "You sure it was a child?" one of them asked. I paused. I was sure, wasn't I? I mean, he looked like a kid, small, couldn't have been older than 10. They looked at each other briefly, then back at me. "No sign of forced entry," the taller one said. "Back door's frame is cracked but didn't splinter. Sounds like they were seconds from getting in." I nodded, arms crossed tightly over my chest. My hands were still trembling, even though I hadn't noticed it until then. "Any cameras?" they asked. "Number just my word, I guess." They said they'd file a report, patrol the area a little while, let me know if anything turned up. Then they were gone. Just like that. And I was alone again. I double-checked the doors, then triple-checked. Every window, every lock. I pulled the blinds tight, turned on every light in the house. I even blocked the back door with a kitchen chair. Still, I didn't feel safe. I sat back down on the same couch. The movie I'd paused hours earlier still hung on the screen, frozen mid-frame, some actor screaming in bad lighting. It almost made me laugh. Almost. My eyes drifted toward the backyard window. I couldn't see anything now. The curtain was closed, but I couldn't shake the image burned into my mind. That small figure, so still, so quiet, so patient. And then it hit me. He wasn't scared. He wasn't lost. He knew exactly what he was doing. I felt something tighten inside my chest, not fear this time, but something darker, something like grief. For the first time, I realized that kid was part of it. He was being used, or worse, he was willing. I stood up, turned the TV off, and walked upstairs. Every creak of the floorboard made me flinch. I locked the bathroom door behind me, not because I thought they'd come back, but because I no longer believed in the walls around me. They'd gotten through once, not just into my house, but into my sense of reality. The locks are still there. The curtains stay drawn after sunset. I bought cameras, motion sensors, even a second deadbolt. But none of it really fixed what changed. What changed was me. I used to think of home as a boundary, a place where the world couldn't touch you unless you invited it in. But now, I understand something I wish I didn't. The world doesn't always wait for an invitation. Sometimes it slips through the cracks, sometimes it knocks softly, and sometimes it sends a child to your back door. People ask me if I ever found out who they were. I didn't. The police followed up a couple times, but there was nothing concrete. No prints, no faces, no neighbors who saw anything. Just me. Just what I remember. And that image of a kid holding a pipe under the moonlight. What eats at me most isn't the break-in attempt. It's how easily I could have opened that door. How close I came to stepping outside with no idea of what was waiting on either side of it. They wanted me to come to them. They counted on my humanity. And I think about that kid. Was he scared? Was he coerced? Or was he already one of them? There's a kind of evil that doesn't wear masks or make noise. It just waits in silence, in shadows, in your own backyard. I used to see the world as mostly good, with a few bad people scattered in between. Now I believe the bad just learned how to wait better. If you're ever alone and something outside doesn't make sense, don't open the door, not even if it's a child. Because some things knock just to see if anyone's still willing to answer. He didn't open the door, and maybe that's what saved his life. But what happens when the danger doesn't wait outside, when it follows you home in broad daylight? Our next story proves that sometimes the most disturbing things don't hide. They park quietly, just across the street. Spring break has always meant something different to me. While most of my classmates booked flights to Miami or Tulum, I packed a duffel bag, tossed it in the back seat, and headed home. No beaches, no parties, just peace. The kind that lives in quiet neighborhoods, faded sidewalks, and the familiar hum of your childhood street. It was my final spring break before graduating college. One last reset before stepping into the unknown. My parents were both working full-time, so the house was mine for most of the day. No drama, no obligations, just me, a quiet house, and maybe a few mornings at the gym to trick myself into thinking I had life figured out. That Monday, I was out the door by 6:20 a.m. The roads were still half asleep. Pale light skimmed over empty lawns, and sprinklers ticked to life one by one. I was halfway to the gym, sipping lukewarm protein shake, when I saw it, an ice cream truck. Parked along the curb, no lights, no music, engine off. It sat motionless in front of an empty lot, sandwiched between two houses I didn't recognize. The truck was older, one of those boxy, beat-up types with cartoon decals sun-faded into pastel ghosts. A clown holding a popsicle grinned from the side panel, but even that smile looked tired. At first, I didn't think much of it. Strange, sure, but not threatening. Maybe the guy lived nearby. Maybe he'd stop for a break. Still, it was March. It was barely 6:30 in the morning. School wasn't out. The air was chilly enough to see your breath if you exhaled deep. I slowed down just enough to look through the driver's window. Empty. Just a Tangle seatbelt and an old fast food wrapper on the dash. I turned the corner, continued toward the gym, and tried to let it go. But the image stuck with me longer than it should have. There was something about the way it didn't belong, like a wrong note in a song you've heard 100 times before. By the time I pulled into the gym lot, I'd almost laughed at myself. Who gets weirded out by an ice cream truck? Still, I kept thinking about it, even during my workout, even as I drove home, and that's when I saw it again. Same spot, same silence, same sinking feeling in my chest, like something had been waiting for me to notice it twice. I don't know what I expected to feel when I saw the truck again. Relief, maybe? Some rational explanation? But instead, I felt that strange pressure in my chest, the kind you get when you realize something is off but can't prove it. Same truck, same position, no lights, no driver. I drove past it slower this time, pretending to adjust the radio. My eyes flicked to the driver's side window again. Still empty. I told myself it didn't matter. Maybe the guy lived on this street and just hadn't moved it. Maybe he left early and came back late. Or maybe I was just looking too hard. But here's the thing. I'd lived in this neighborhood my whole life, and I had never seen an ice cream truck here, not even when I was a kid. We weren't that kind of suburb. No jingles, no neighborhood vendors, just Amazon vans and lawn care pickups. That afternoon, I went about my day, ate lunch, did some reading, scrolled through my phone too long. It was almost 3 p.m. when I stepped outside to check the mail, and that's when I saw it again. The truck, not in the same place. Now it was parked 3 houses down, on my side of the street. Engine still off, still no music. It wasn't facing my house directly, but it didn't need to. I could feel it, that presence, the same way you feel someone staring at you across a room, even if you haven't looked up yet. I didn't move for a while. I just stood there at the end of my driveway, holding a stack of junk mail, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Had the guy really followed me home? Was that even possible? I took a slow breath, turned around, and walked back inside. Calm, unshaken, at least on the outside. But once I was upstairs, I went to the guest bedroom. It had the best view of the street. I peeked out from behind the curtain. Still there, not a flinch, not a sound. I watched for 5 minutes, then 10. Nothing. Eventually, I walked away. But every half hour or so, I found myself drifting back, just to check. Each time, the truck was still visible, but never in quite the same spot. It moved. It was circling. I didn't call the cops. I didn't text anyone. Because what would I say? There's a guy in an ice cream truck parked near my house. I didn't have evidence. All I had was a growing certainty that this wasn't just weird anymore. It was personal. I couldn't take it anymore. By late afternoon, I'd checked the window at least 10 times. The truck never stayed in one place for long. It shifted up the block, around the corner, across the street. Never directly in front of my house, but always within view. Always just far enough to plausibly deny intention. But I knew this wasn't random. My nerves were shot, my skin buzzing with adrenaline I couldn't use. I didn't want to call the police again. Still nothing had technically happened. So, I did something stupid. I went looking for my brother's binoculars. He's a bird watcher, the kind of guy who labels his gear and keeps checklists. I found the binoculars in his room, tucked in their usual case, and brought them to the guest bedroom. I crouched by the window, heart thudding in my chest like a warning. Just one look, I told myself, one glimpse. Then I'll know if I'm imagining things. I parted the curtain and raised the binoculars. The truck was there, 3 houses down, on the opposite side of the street. And so was the man. He was sitting in the driver's seat, facing forward. But the second I focused in, he turned his head and stared right at me. He was holding a pair of binoculars. We locked eyes, if you can call it that, each of us peering into the other's world through twin circles of glass. He didn't flinch. He didn't look surprised. He had been watching me for hours. I dropped the curtain like it burned me. My pulse roared in my ears. My hands trembled. This wasn't just stalking anymore. This was a message. That night, I tried to act normal, ate dinner, watched TV, kept every window locked, every curtain drawn. I told myself it was over. He had made his point and moved on. Around 3 a.m., I woke up, not to a sound, to a feeling, that primal sense of being observed. I sat up in bed and grabbed my phone. It was exactly 3:11 a.m. Then I heard it. Music. Faint. Off in the distance. High-pitched and whimsical. The jingle of an ice cream truck. My breath caught. I stood slowly, stepped toward the window, and paused beside it. I didn't look yet. I wasn't ready. Then came the soft tick against the glass. Then another. Someone was throwing pebbles at my window. I counted to 3, pulled the curtain, and saw him. The man, standing in my front yard, directly below my window, and on either side of him. 2 small figures, children, or something close to it, too small to be adults. They were holding his hands, not struggling, just standing there, staring up, as if they'd been waiting all along. I didn't scream. I just backed away from the window, slowly, like moving too fast might break whatever fragile thread was keeping that man from climbing through the glass. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand and dialed 911 before I even knew I was doing it. By the time the dispatcher picked up, I was already shaking my dad awake. "There's a man outside," I whispered. "He's got kids with him. They were throwing rocks at my window. Please hurry." My dad didn't ask questions. He just moved. By the time we stepped outside, the man was gone. No music, no truck, just the kind of silence that feels like something breathing behind your ear. The police showed up 20 minutes later. I gave them everything. The truck, the staring, the binoculars, the children. They took notes, asked if I had cameras. I didn't. They promised to keep an eye out. The words felt thin. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep the next one either. And then, life moved on. Or pretended to. I went back to school. My parents kept the porch light on all night. We didn't talk about it much until 3 weeks later. My mom called. Her voice was tight, like she was holding her breath. "You need to see the news," she said. "Channel 7, right now." I turned it on. 2 children, 6-year-old twins, a boy and a girl, reported missing from a neighborhood just 30 minutes from ours. The footage cut to their school photos. 2 smiling kids in matching sweaters. And my blood turned to ice. Because I knew I had seen them, standing beside that man in my front yard at 3 in the morning. I didn't sleep that night either. Some nights I still hear the music. It's not real, I know that. Just echoes stitched into my memory. But even now, when the house is quiet and the wind brushes the windows just right, it creeps back in. That soft, playful melody. Out of tune, out of season, out of place. I think the scariest part of all this wasn't the staring, or the truck, or even the night he stood on my lawn holding hands with those 2 silent children. It was what happened after. Nothing, no arrests, no suspects. Just a couple of photos on the news and a hollow request for information. I didn't tell anyone outside my family what happened. I couldn't. What would I say? That guy the police can't find? I think he was standing in front of my house. What would that even change? Some nights, I wonder if I could have done something more. If I should have gone outside, spoken up sooner, grabbed a camera, yelled, intervened. But the truth is, I was afraid, not just of him, but of what it meant to be seen by something like that. Watched, chosen, not because of who I was, but because I was alone. That's what he was looking for. Not an address, not a name, just an opening, and I gave it to him. I don't know what happened to those kids. I don't know if they were victims or accomplices. But I know that night wasn't the beginning of something. It was the middle of something bigger, something that had been happening quietly, in plain sight. And I think that's the part people don't understand about horror. It doesn't knock. It parks across the street. It waits. And it smiles. If you ever hear the jingle of an ice cream truck long after the sun has gone down, don't look out the window, because if he's out there, he's already seen you. Some predators use bait, some use fear, but others use something far more intimate, your own voice. Our final story takes us from the street into the mind, where reality unravels not with a bang, but with a ringtone. I work in sales, which, if you've ever done it, means you never really leave the job behind. Even when I'm not on the floor, I'm on the phone, following leads, answering questions, scheduling test drives. Sometimes I feel like the phone is the only thing that connects me to the world. It was a Thursday night, just after 10. I was already in bed, lights off, brain finally settling into that rare, precious silence. That's when it rang. Unknown number. Normally I'd answer out of habit, sales reflex. But something about how late it was made me hesitate. I let it ring out. No voicemail. I figured if it was important, they'd call again. And they did. 3 minutes later, same number. This time, I answered. "Hello?" At first, nothing, just static. Thick, uneven, like someone rubbing a microphone against denim. I waited, irritated but curious. Then, through the fuzz, I heard a voice. My voice. It wasn't someone who sounded like me. It was me, not live. A recording. I sat up in bed. the phone still pressed to my ear. My own voice spilled through the line, clipped and distorted but unmistakable. I was talking about lease terms, inventory options, just sales talk, stuff I'd said earlier that day. It wasn't threatening, it wasn't even interesting, but it stopped me cold because no one else should have had that recording. The client I'd spoken to, normal guy, nothing shady. I even remembered joking with him about the weather. There was no reason he'd have recorded me, let alone played it back from an anonymous number. I hung up, sat there in the dark, staring at the ceiling. I wasn't panicking, not yet. But something wasn't right. I told myself it was probably a glitch, some weird auto dialer messing up a robocall. Still, I didn't sleep well that night. And when my phone rang again the next evening, same static, different number, and another recording of my own voice. That's when I knew this wasn't a mistake. It was a message. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I called the client from that first recording, just to confirm he was real. He picked up right away, polite, friendly, totally unaware of anything out of the ordinary. When I asked if he'd recorded our call yesterday, he laughed. Why would I do that? I apologized, hung up. But I didn't feel better. That night, it happened again. Another unknown number, different digits, but the same static heavy click when I picked up. This time, the recording was from the very afternoon, me talking with a different client about a delivery delay. The conversation was clear, exact, word for word. Only now, there was no trace of the other person's voice. Just me, like I was talking into a void. I hung up, my hands were cold. I checked the call log, screenshot the number, tried a reverse lookup, nothing. This wasn't some scammer fishing for money. There were no threats, no messages, no ransom, just playback. Every word I'd said was being reflected back to me, like some technological mirror with no frame. The third night, I didn't answer. I let the call go to voicemail. They didn't leave one, but I still heard my voice when I played the audio file back later. Same cadence, same phrases, same fake charm I used when closing weak deals. And no matter how many times I told myself it wasn't a big deal, my stomach disagreed. I started checking the locks twice before bed, then 3 times. I turned off my phone completely during dinner, left it in the bathroom while I showered, but it didn't help. The next night, the phone rang again. Same static, same ghost of my voice. And suddenly, it wasn't just creepy, it was invasive. Whoever this was, they weren't just listening to me. They were watching me live my life and throwing it back at me in pieces, and I couldn't tell why. That's what kept me up the most, not the fear, the not knowing. By the end of the week, I was unraveling, not in the dramatic movie kind of way. There was no shouting, no breakdown in the middle of a grocery store, just a slow erosion, piece by piece, night by night. The phone calls didn't stop. If anything, they got bolder. Every evening around the same time, a new number would flash on the screen. Different digits, but always unknown. And each time, a recording of a new conversation from that day. Just me, talking, trying to sound normal. It was like someone was collecting my voice, piece by piece, and building something I couldn't see. I started recording the calls myself. I don't know why. Maybe I thought it would help me prove something to myself or the police. But listening to those recordings only made things worse, because the voice didn't sound like mine anymore. It sounded like someone wearing me, a version of myself drained of context, flattened by static, pulled apart and reassembled like some broken doll trying to walk again. I became hyper-aware of every call I made, every word I said, every sentence that might end up echoing back at me later that night. I began stepping outside to take phone calls, in the car, where I could see in every direction. I stopped answering unknown numbers entirely, but they kept coming. Always a little too late, always when I was most tired. I left lights on in every room, slept with the bedroom door locked and a chair pushed against it. At one point, I walked past a mirror and didn't recognize myself. Not because I looked different, but because I couldn't remember when I'd last felt like me. And that's when I thought of her, my mother. She was diagnosed with schizophrenia in her early 40s. I remember the shift, how she started whispering to herself at night, how she'd unplug all the appliances before bed because she thought the microwave was listening. I used to think it was sad. Now, I wasn't so sure. Was this how it started? Was it paranoia? Or was someone really listening? I went to the police. I told them everything. Well, almost everything. I left out the part about my mom. I didn't want them filing me away as another mentally unstable adult with too much internet time. They were polite, wrote it down, promised to look into the numbers, but I could see it in their eyes. They thought I was cracking. Maybe I was, but when I left the station, there was a new voicemail waiting, and it was my voice again. Softer this time, slower, as if it had been dragged across broken glass before reaching me. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was the lack of sleep. Maybe it was the weight of silence pressing in from every direction. Or maybe I just needed it to end, one way or another. That night, the phone rang again, same static, same slow distortion. But this time, I didn't hang up. I let the sound wash over me like white noise, like ocean waves made of my own voice. I listened until it stopped, and when the static faded, there was something new. A voice, not mine. It was low, warped, like it was coming through a voice changer. The words were simple. 11 o'clock. That was it. No threat, no explanation, just a time. I don't remember picking up the gun, but I did. It had been locked in the drawer beside my bed since I bought the house, just in case. That night, just in case, finally meant something. I loaded it, checked the chamber twice, then walked down to the kitchen and sat at the table. My address already sent. My phone screen still glowing with the last call log, heart pounding but hands steady. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't call the police. I just waited. Every noise in the house became amplified. The hum of the fridge, the tick of the wall clock, my own breathing. At 10:41, I started whispering to myself, repeating old conversations, words from clients, lines I'd used so many times I didn't know if they were mine anymore. At 10:52, I turned off all the lights but left the porch light on, just in case he needed to find me. At 10:59, I gripped the gun tighter, and at 11 o'clock, nothing happened, no knock, no voice, no shadow in the doorway, just stillness. The kind of stillness that makes you wonder if time has stopped moving, or if you have. I stayed there all night. The gun got heavy in my hand, my back ached, my throat burned from how dry it had become. But I didn't move. Somewhere around sunrise, I fell asleep at the table, slumped over like a soldier who never made it to battle. And in the hours that followed, there were no calls, no static, no recordings. Only the weight of what I'd done. And the quiet question I couldn't stop asking, what would I have done if he had come? The calls never came back. No static, no recordings, no warped echoes of my own voice whispering through the wires. And somehow, that made it worse. When something haunts you, you at least know where the fear is coming from. But when it vanishes, without reason, without closure, it leaves behind something colder than fear. Emptiness. I changed my number, bought a new phone, new service provider. I told everyone it was a tech issue. Nobody asked questions. I took time off work, told my boss I was burned out. He nodded like he understood, but I saw it in his eyes, that slight recoil, like he didn't know if I was tired or unraveling. I saw a therapist. She listened, took notes, suggested anxiety, mild trauma, maybe obsessive ideation. I didn't tell her about the gun. I didn't tell her about 11 o'clock because no one needed to know how close I had come to doing something I couldn't take back. Not because I wanted to die, but because I couldn't take it anymore. The not knowing. The silence was like a weight I carried in my chest. Some nights, I still flinch when my phone buzzes. I still check unknown numbers with my thumb hovering over the decline button. I still wonder if one day I'll answer and hear my own voice again, cold, detached, disembodied. And worst of all, I don't think I'd be surprised. I think about my mom sometimes, about how people said she slipped, that her mind just went. But now, I wonder if maybe she heard something too. Maybe she answered a call the rest of us didn't. Maybe that's the part of madness no one talks about. It doesn't always come from within. Sometimes, it calls first. If your phone ever rings late at night and you don't recognize the number, don't answer it. Because if you do, you might find out that someone or something knows you better than you know yourself. And it's not calling to talk, it's calling to listen. 3 different stories, 3 different kinds of horror. A child used as a trap, a truck that doesn't sell anything sweet, and a voice on the line that shouldn't exist. But what ties them all together isn't what was seen or heard, it's what was taken. Trust. The kind you have in your home, your neighborhood, even in your own mind. If you've ever felt watched or sensed something wrong without knowing why, trust that feeling. Because in all 3 of these stories, the danger didn't come crashing through the door. It crept in quietly and stayed just long enough to change everything. In every creepy story, there's more than just fear. Behind the shadows, strange noises and chilling encounters are quiet truths. Truths about trust, instinct, and how quickly the world can shift from normal to something unrecognizable. These scary true stories, like the ones shared in Twilight Whispers, remind us that danger doesn't always look like a monster in the dark. Sometimes it wears a friendly smile. Sometimes it hides in plain sight. A child at your back door, a truck that never plays music, a phone call that sounds just like you. But what if these true horror stories are not just stories? What if they're warnings? Not every door should be opened. Not every familiar place is truly safe. And not every strange moment should be ignored. The world teaches us to be polite, to give the benefit of the doubt, to trust what we see. But these stories ask us to do something more important, to listen to our gut, to pause, to question what feels wrong. If any part of these stories made your heart race or your breath catch, don't ignore that. Let it remind you that awareness can save lives. Caution is not fear, it's wisdom. And if you felt something tonight, don't keep it to yourself. Share this story, talk about it, start a conversation. Because the scariest thing isn't what's outside your door, it's when no one listens, until it's too late. More stories like this are waiting. Subscribe to Twilight Whispers and stay one step ahead of the dark.